On this week's episode of the Father Dynasty Podcast, Tyler joins me to talk coaching our kids' sports teams, Dolphins and Bears and Swifties, oh my, and Rookie Roundup. So, without further ado. What is up, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of the Father Dynasty Podcast. I'm your fatherly host, Chu, here in the manhole, here to talk fatherhood, fantasy football, and everything in between. And with me today is a very special guest, a frequent flyer, a frequent Tyler. You know him. You love him. Check him out on Twitter at tdaily11. Tyler, how you doing, brother?
Doing good. Excited for the doubleheader tonight. First Monday night of the season where I have a fantasy matchup, actually fantasy matchups in the balance. So that's always has a lot of excitement and just anticipation around it. So especially when there's a doubleheader and multiple players involved, don't get many or if any of these left the rest of the season in terms of having a doubleheader. So bad weekend of football overall for me, but hopefully a good ending tonight.
Yeah, and these Monday night doubleheaders are exactly, I feel like, what everyone needs after having what I'm sure feels like a long football weekend every weekend with college football and everything on Saturday, plenty of NFL action on Sunday, and getting to actually have two games and being staggered an hour, basically guaranteeing, once you watch that one, you get to finish off with that second one. And I think you'd mentioned before, one of the common players in your matchup stuff you're dealing with tonight is Puka Nacua. So you're excited to see if he can string together another absurd 20 target game, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know what the record is through 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but I know he's got like 35 coming into tonight. So I'm rolling him out there, basically treating him like a wide receiver one at this point until proven otherwise. I've both won and lost a lot of money under the premise that you ride something until the wheels fall off. So we're riding Puka until the wheels fall off.
I will say, I remember hearing it was some statistician, and they were talking about there's the hot hand fallacy. And I'm like, you can say statistically it's a fallacy, but I feel like for anyone that is either played in sports or, just enjoyed sports like thoroughly, hot hand, that's a real thing. Like, there's some magic about it, but that is very much a real thing.
There's some things that analytics bros they just can't fully wrap their head around. And some of it is just, that's why we have football guys, people who just get the game and get the intangibles. So there's absolutely such thing as a hot hand.
Oh yeah. Well, speaking of intangibles and the important stuff of the game, whether it's football, whether it's baseball, basketball, anything else, when we think about as our kids are growing up and everything, it starts getting into actual sports, whether the beginning part of it is not really sports, it's more of like organized recess where they include like sporting equipment, or actual sports when they're really learning, how to dribble, how to shoot, how to whatever. So are you thinking in your mind you are going to be a coach one day? I know, of course, your dad was our fearless leader for many basketball seasons.
I would love to. I do think that it would be important for me and my children for me not to enter it at a super young age, because patience isn't one of my top qualities. And I think I need some other parents that have a different skill set than I do to usher the kids past those early years where they have to work with things like waning attention spans or, maybe not a serious interest in the sport. I think maybe around the early teenage years, moving into like 13 and up would be a good age range for me to pick up, because at that point, hopefully, ideally, the kids that are there want to be there. They want to get better. They want to compete, because I am an ultra competitive person and I'm not patient, which I think is really in the coaching world probably would make me very fire and ice. It's I might be just absolutely
vinegar,
terrible, and cannot communicate the things that I need to because I lack patience and I get frustrated. But if I am effective in communicating and that I can be infectious with my hatred for losing and love for winning, then that could be great. You never know. So it's something I definitely would be interested in, though. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely I would like to. I know I will, but I'm trying to figure out if I'm sticking myself to only sports that I feel like I have some semblance of a handle on. Like if it's going to be, say, soccer or basketball. Of course, football, I played zero organized, and baseball, I made it to majors. I got hit enough and was so terrified in the batter's box that my nickname was Penguin because I stood in a stoic, statuesque position in the back corner of the batter's box. So thinking about what things, like I know people say, those that can do and those that can't teach or something like that. So there's plenty I
Right.
can't do. So I guess the thought would be I can teach myself to teach other people things. And as I've told Marley plenty of times, I am incredibly patient in most anything in my life aside from driving and Finn. Mostly the latter. Test my patience every moment of every day. So, but I'm thinking in the sporting realm, I feel like that would be much more appealing to kind of like, I mean, even Finn does like soccer, and then he did T-ball for his first season this year, which is really fun. I was essentially his bodyguard for T-ball in the infield because he would just run away sometimes, or he would start throwing rocks at kids or near kids, and they dodge them. But so hoping like once he kind of rounds out and really focuses on stuff, that might be more appealing. Like you're saying, like once they're older and once they're like focused and committed on at least like learning and trying to do better. Before then, it's slightly organized chaos. So I'll do what I can. But in your mind, was there like a sport you'd feel like, so it's like soccer I know I want to do, or like one that you'd want specifically to be able to do, or you feel like you'd maybe thrive in the most?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be soccer, and one because it's the sport I played the most growing up, obviously, and know the most about. I keep up with still, and I also think that given on a just a real life, let's say I continue in the current career path that I am, I think that soccer would cater well in that. In theory, if Emma were to play like in a travel league or something like that, I feel like a lot of times there's opportunities for like an assistant coach in that scenario because in those clubs maybe they can only afford a coach and that guy's looking for a guy or girl's looking for like a little bit of help. So like many of the travel teams I played on and that you played on, there was always like a secondary assistant coach, maybe almost like a team manager type thing. So not as full of a commitment, but somebody who can still be involved. And but who knows? Maybe I'll just stick with the refereeing and leave the coaching to the experts. I'll just have to argue with the coaches and have everyone not like me.
Hey, no, I can see you on the sidelines as a parent enjoying the game and just pull your flag out, and just whip it up.
That'd actually be great. Yeah, I used to be a
like
ref
he called
for
offside.
years.
Just like he's not even with us.
That's incredible.
Well, so we both know that we're going to thrive as coaches probably in the next decade or so for our kids, but let's jump into the FF perspective. So 3 hot pieces of news coming out of week 3, and of course we're recording this Monday night, so we're still somewhat in the thick of week 3. But the first piece of news here, there's not really a question; it's more just what's your thoughts on it. The Miami Dolphins, now 3-0, embarrassed, which is the word Sean Payton used, the Denver Broncos, who are now 0-3, 70-20. Your thoughts?
It's almost like, where do you begin with these Broncos and Sean Payton? And given some of the stuff, the comments that Sean Payton made during the offseason, it's really hard to feel sorry for the guy in any way, shape, or form. With him talking so much smack about the previous regime and acting like it was all going to be basically peaches and cream moving forward. And we talked about in our group chat with you, me, and Jacob. It's just like I can't remember a quarterback, and maybe you can think of one, that just literally has seemingly fallen off this cliff like this, where I don't know if it's age or if it's the system, or was there just such great talent with some of the receivers and the defense and surrounding help in Seattle. But Russell Wilson, I mean, good gosh, talk about just how ultimate buyer's remorse on a contract. But yeah, you have to wonder just what's going on up there. What is Russell Wilson doing taking snaps, late into the fourth quarter when they're down by damn near 40 points, and then eventually obviously we're down by that much. And I was looking ahead to the next couple weeks, and they're going to Chicago. They're a 3.5 point road favorite against a team that also just got smoked. Like I think I saw somewhere on Twitter that you could get a ticket in there before fees for $2.50 to the Bears Broncos game this weekend. So you could probably you're a rare situation where where you could probably get the whole family in for under $100 at those prices. But then they go to, let's see, I didn't write it down. I forget where they go to after Chicago, but it's like, I don't know. I'm almost at a loss for words because they have the talent. I mean, we were talking about this team before the season started with the wide receiver talent and Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, and Greg Dulcich was going to be used in this multifaceted role. They have a healthy Javonte Williams coming back. They brought in Samaje Perine, who they were excited about to kind of work off of him, and they haven't even really looked good at any point. They came out really strong in week 2 against Washington, and then just completely pissed down their leg the rest of the game and blew that one too. So it's just, and it's a shame that most of my attention in a 70-point output is drawn towards the losing team. But, I remember in high school, we got our asses kicked by one of our rival schools, 9-0 one game. And it was not indicative of how good we were as a team. It was just, we gave up that night. And so whenever I see a team just get completely smacked like this, I'm like, okay, they gave up clearly in that game, but what are we going to see from the Broncos moving forward? I mean, and on the flip side of things, man, is there just, it might be a little bit of an overstep here, especially given the 70 points being the driver behind it. But it's is there a better coach than Mike McDaniel in the NFL right now? I mean, holy smokes, this guy is taking Tua and 2 wide receivers and just a group of running backs that basically, nobody wants or wanted, with an aging Raheem Mostert. They'll have Jeff Wilson Jr. back. Obviously, Devon Achane popped off and looks like he could be a stud moving forward. So that it's not exactly like this on paper loaded type roster. And I mean, he's just got these guys rolling. So I've talked enough. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, thinking of how tremendously far Russell Wilson has fallen and how quickly this has happened. I mean, he is a little bit older, but he's also not quite in the same, when it was the Drew Brees and the Peyton Manning, some of those guys where in their final season, you're good, you're game by game, you're just watching them physically fall apart. And I know those guys were very cerebral in their own right. And it was more like you watch the arm power go down, but you could tell they were making the same decisions they thought they used to be able to make, but it just wasn't working out. Now, I don't even understand the decisions that Russell Wilson is making, which is the confusing part, because in some of it, he's been running a little bit more thus far, only through 3 weeks, but he's been moving more that we would have hoped he would, but his decisions make no sense at all. And it's not like he played the 3 best defenses so far. I mean, I'm not saying, Washington does have a pretty tough front four, so I'm not saying they don't, but I mean, it was Vegas the first week, and then the next couple of games are going to be Chicago, you got the Jets, the Chiefs, the Packers, Chiefs again, then they have a bye. So, I mean, honestly, after the Bears...
what's the looking at that schedule, sorry to interrupt, but looking at that schedule before the bye, what's the over-under for wins right now? 1.5? Maybe you beat Chicago, maybe you beat New York, but... which is crazy to say, hey, you're maybe beating those teams, but
yeah,
they're both of those teams are having their struggles too. So,
well, that's the funny thing, thinking about how bad the Broncos have been thus far. And there's a couple other defeated teams to this point. One of them is emblazoned on the wall behind me. But thinking about how the last couple of seasons, we go into each season, so the Seahawks, we look at them, we're they are simply devoid of talent. I don't know how a possibly Geno Smith or Drew Lock led team is going to do well, and they shocked us all. Already to this point, it's early enough, but we just watched the Cardinals knock off the Cowboys, which, it's any given Sunday, I get that, but the Cardinals have honestly not looked too bad considering how devoid of talent they are. So it almost seems at this point like, they are all professionals playing a professional sport, but I don't think it should ever be looked at the beginning of the season who is devoid of talent, because at this point, it seems like any team can will themselves to a victory, and possibly exceed their win-loss projections in any given season, which is crazy. And yeah, like you were saying, it's so funny to focus so much on the Broncos side of things when the Miami Dolphins put up 70. But I mean, that is so much the anomaly that the Broncos got whooped that bad than it is the Miami Dolphins did so well. But a bigger note, too, is that the Dolphins did all that without Jalen Waddle. And I'm not saying he is their best weapon. I mean, but second best, I would say. And it really does just go to show, McDaniel, what he's able to do in terms of the system he has is tremendous. And I know it's in kind of the outline, the design of what the Shanahan system is in San Fran. Of course, that's where he was coming from. But it's pretty incredible what he's able to do. And I think that shows how both the Niners and the Dolphins are doing thus far, that doing it in slightly different ways. But that shows maybe where the offenses are trending now in the NFL, which is high-flying, exciting, and pure speed. Jumping over to another rough start, I would say, and a team that is doing the same old thing, I guess you could say, a fan base that has been suffering for many, many years at this point. So the Bears are also starting 0-3, losing to the Packers, Buccaneers, and Chiefs. Next up is the winless Broncos, so very excited to see what happens there. Is Fields the QB of the future in Chicago?
Yeah, I don't think you can possibly answer yes to that at this point. Given, put all the media drama and everything aside, or whatever assurances they tried to give us, where they're hugging during the middle of the week, that everything's okay. But unless Chicago, I think, fundamentally changes and goes back to kind of what they were doing last year. I mean, Justin Fields has two things basically that he excels at, and they're two good things. I mean, he's obviously a great runner, and he can throw the deep ball. And last year when they were, where they're building that momentum and Justin Fields is having these strong games, I mean, that's what they were doing, 8+ design runs for him per game. And now, don't get me wrong, I've not watched a ton of Bears football this year because, one, why would I, given the kind of product that they're putting out on the field right now? But, from the clips that I have seen, they're trying to put Justin Fields into this, almost like a more Jalen Hurts type role where, the runs are there if he wants them, but it's Jalen Hurts is obviously infinitely better of a passer at this point in his career. And that was the knock on Justin Fields coming in, was he holds on to the ball too long. He takes too long to process. And I think I saw today, the Bears are now either second or third worst in the league. They're at like an 11.5% sack rate for Justin Fields. And, it's starting to look like at this point, we need to be looking at tanking. I know teams in the NFL don't really tank, but they've got the Panthers pick in the bag and they've got their own pick in the bag. If one of those doesn't end up being the number one, then maybe they just need to punt on this Justin Fields thing and see whatever the heck they can do to move up and get Caleb Williams or Tyler Van Dimes, or whatever you want to whatever other quarterback is going to go in the top 5 in this upcoming draft class. Because I think at this point you can pretty much say the Justin Fields experiment is effectively over, especially if they don't change the way that they're scheming it up for him.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the winless teams to this point, the Bears, Vikings, Panthers, Broncos, and Bengals currently, although, of course, like we were talking about, they will be playing tonight, apparently with Joe Burrow hobbling on there. It's incredible that the Bears they, of course, have their own pick, and like you said, they do have the Panthers pick as well, both of which are going to be fantastic picks. And I know that I think it was Jake who had initially pointed me out to this guy, but Tyson Bagent, the guy from Shepherd University, the undrafted free agent, going and has actually earned the backup spot in Chicago. I know it's not going to devolve to them actually letting him start, but at some point you want excitement and you want some sort of hope for the team. And the roller coaster that Fields has put them on, and also they've kind of put Fields on in a way. It's not helping anybody. Yeah, the Fields hugging Luke Getsy on the practice field, making it seem like everything's good. I wouldn't hug the guy because even if it's trying to, give the illusion that they're all good, I would be more focused on encouraging the OC who has a full season of tape showing here's when it started. It wasn't very good. Here's what changed, and here's what I did incredibly well. I get him growing a skill set, but it almost kind of seems like when you have a player being traded maybe midseason, you sometimes hear like, let me get you integrated into the playbook and everything. What are you familiar with? What are you good with? Let's start you off with that, and then we'll build from there. And that's for someone start like in the middle of the season going there. And I know a quarterback is different, but Fields has been there for a couple of years at this point. And I know this is a new OC and everything, but understand maybe what he's best at and then go from there, not go with what you want and then maybe pepper in what he's good at. Because, you can see how dejected he is playing, and I can understand why between him getting sacked because he holds it too long and he seems to just not have that same kind of free will in the sense of breaking off those long runs like he used to, which were valuable for fantasy, but also were valuable for, the team doing better, winning, and being more exciting. Well, the third piece of news, and arguably the most exciting for everyone in the fantasy and football space. So Taylor Swift was in the box seats of Arrowhead Stadium watching her boo Travis Kelce light it up. And would you say, is Taylor Swift the most famous girlfriend to attend an NFL game?
The only other one that I thought of, and she pales in comparison for sure. So I guess the short answer to your question, I think, is yes. The only other couple that I think kind of stirred up this level of drama, are you guessing where I'm going?
I know one
here?
of them.
Where did you play? Yeah, go ahead and guess.
I was going to guess Jessica Simpson and Tony Romo.
That's exactly what I had written down.
Biggest one I was thinking of, yeah.
Yeah, that immediately came to mind. I was like, what else drew eyeballs? And it was Jessica Simpson in that pink number 9 Tony Romo jersey in the press box. But this has to be the biggest one since then. And it's funny because now I've got my wife downstairs on a Sunday afternoon wanting me to let her know every time Travis Kelce catches the ball. So they're going to put Taylor up on the TV. And apparently, and this is going to make me sound like such an old boomer, but I guess through the Super Bowl last year, with the Kelce brothers squaring off, apparently their mom got social media famous. So it's there you've got Mrs. Kelce sitting next to Taylor Swift, and there's all this stuff. My wife's telling me all the stories on her Instagram are about Mrs. Kelce and T Swift, and it's just
nice.
What version of football is this? But it was really cool, and it's created a bunch of really funny content on Twitter and stuff too. So good for him, and I guess good for her, because if you let my wife tell it again, apparently this is very different than the normal guy that Taylor Swift goes after. So maybe she's really got it right this time. She's pursuing happiness. So
I will say in a similar vein, I was talking to Marley about it. She was talking about, the last one, we're waiting on to have a song about him or an album about him. I'm like, well, who is that guy? So just so many of these things where I just apparently am not in the know. And I was like, I thought she was still with the same guy that apparently she was with for a long time, and then just not with him. And then she went on this tour because Marley actually went to see her up in Philly, went to the Link,
nice.
And thoroughly enjoyed that experience. But yeah, the first one I thought of, which I can't think of any other ones that was the girlfriend, so that kind of made it, I guess, more exciting than just having your spouse there who's famous. The Jessica Simpson one and Tony Romo, which it's funny that, at the time I know Jessica Simpson was tremendously more famous than she is now, but still not to the level, I don't think, as Taylor Swift being a global superstar kind of thing. And I did notice, I didn't look into the actual article or anything, but I saw something about Travis Kelce's jersey sales increasing 400%. I don't know if it was since the game or something like probably since the game, implying that all of these Swifties or Taylor Swift fans are seemingly now not football fans, but they're Travis Kelce fans.
And it's just phenomenal that guys like Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid now have to take questions about Taylor Swift and their post-game presser and stuff. It's just, gosh, that's high quality stuff right there.
Oh man. Well, so we've went down that rabbit hole. I guess we can jump back into a fantasy football reality, which is a rookie roundup, looking at a couple of the rookies thus far to this point in terms of what they've done in terms of actual production. What we expected in terms of where they may have been drafted in rookie drafts, our rookie draft specifically, because I think ours was fairly standard and kind of fell in line with what a lot of ADPs were for other super flex leagues there. Is there? I know I had a list of random guys here. Is there someone who you wanted to start off on?
I
Was
would
interested
just,
in?
I kind of wrote it down by position, the way that you had structured it, and just kind of a thought on each one. So if we
Mm-hmm.
start at the top with quarterbacks, like I think honestly, the only thing that would change for me, in our draft, I took Bryce Young first overall, as you know. CJ Stroud went Anthony Richardson went. He was the second quarterback off the board. I think he went fourth or fifth, and then CJ Stroud shortly thereafter. I think that did I have those mixed up, or
No, you're right.
does
Yeah,
that
it was
sound right?
102,
Yeah.
104, 106. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think the only difference I would change there is that's right. I had the 102 and took Young. I would go AR-15. I would go Anthony Richardson before Bryce Young. Now, given what I've seen, I
Mm.
had some concerns about accuracy, as a lot of people did with Anthony Richardson, but we obviously knew the floor was going to be there with his rushing ability. I know it was just one full game, but I just think that he looked really confident and really strong as a passer in week one. And I know he got knocked out of the contest early on in week two. Still got two rushing touchdowns, so he was about to go like freaking nuclear, I think. Um, so I think that's the only thing I would change, is just I would probably have. I think I would still take Bryce Young over CJ Stroud, even though we just saw Stroud have a really strong game. I still think I would take Bryce Young over him, but Anthony Richardson would be my QB1 if I had to do it over.
Yeah, I was disappointed. I know I was beating the drum for a Rich all offseason, and I ended up trading out of the pick just because I have no patience and I have no ability to sit there and sit in that one pick because I think I'm getting value in my mind. But yeah, 100% with Richardson going first. It's kind of shocking, when we see how big he is, how athletic he is, and everything. Not that he runs as much as he does, but that he ended up being so fragile so early in the season. I mean, it's the problem with being that big and kind of putting yourself in those sorts of positions that leads you to getting crunched and hit and everything. So it's going to happen, I'm sure, but I hope it's not going to be some sort of, like another Cam Newton treatment, as he just got abused over the years. And of course, him being a bigger guy, I do think there was some level of bias in terms of the abuse he took versus what stuff ended up being called, and kind of somewhat protecting the quarterback. Although some of which were when he was as a true runner, and who's not going to hit a quarterback when he's running. Yeah, the Stroud one is interesting. I'm still a bit hesitant because I do believe, of what I've seen of Bryce Young, which I've watched most of the games or at least enough of the games thus far. I'm more just bothered by the offensive play calling than I am like believing that Young is just playing terribly. He is running a bit too, which I was excited to see because I was glad to see he wasn't too scared, given he is of course tremendously small compared to everyone else on that field, but he's reasonably athletic. He's a good decision maker. Yet to be in a position where have a kind of that clutch moment that I feel like he was so well known for, of kind of having ice in his veins back in college, but. For fantasy's sake, yeah, it's A. Rich, still Bryce Young by a hair, and then C.J. Stroud. Jumping over to the running backs, this I feel like is where a couple of people kind of bounced around for us, and yeah, curious to hear your thoughts at least on those top couple, those first rounders that we had in our rookie draft.
Yeah, I think they still hold true. I mean, we saw Bijan pop off a little bit in week one. He hasn't exactly hit the ceiling that I think others, or that most have expected. But the one that stood out for me that was a bit of an anomaly is Kendre Miller at number 8. I thought it was a little bit crazy at the time. I still think it's a little bit crazy. I know that we haven't been able to see much of him given the offseason injury and everything, but I still think with we've seen so far out of the New Orleans offense, or lack thereof. I don't, not a huge believer in him overall, and so just the fact that the guy like Devon Achane and I can't remember. I'm missing one other name, but like a couple guys that went behind him. I think that was a bit of a reach. He was someone that I expected to go in round 2 for sure, not in the tail end of round 1.
Yeah, because we had a nice little gap after it was Achane was 109. This is a 10 team just for perspective. Achane was 109, and then it was a full round later going at the 209 was it was Charbonnet 203. Tank Bigsby 205, and then Roschon Johnson was at 209. So a couple of those you could kind of shuffle around. I know Tank Bigsby was one that I think a lot of people were excited about going into the offseason. The offseason, I think he did, from all reports, tremendously well. And then the season started, and Doug Peterson didn't really give a shit about how training camp sounded like it went for Twitter. It's still Travis Etienne's backfield. Roschon Johnson, of course, plenty of people were beating that drum, saying that, oh man, what if he wasn't playing behind Bijan in college. I almost forgot who that was. And he's now getting the chance to attempt to take over that Chicago backfield, but much like we were talking about, that offense is not looking too awe-inspiring at this point, so whoever's going to lead that backfield, it still might not really amount to much at this point. 2 exciting ones thus far, outside of Bijan, obviously, was Jahmyr Gibbs doing what he's doing. Of course, Montgomery going down, thinking we'll get the chance to see Gibbs do more. And, of course, now we just got to watch Achane compile 243 total yards and 4 touchdowns in one game, which is insane.
Sure.
Most of which of his yards were rushing, which I really did not expect. Not that he wouldn't get that opportunity, but, I know that's a big reason why, with Jeff Wilson and Salvon Ahmed, 2 guys who are a bit bigger, that they can kind of have take that abuse on the interior and that sort of thing, and have the speedsters, the mosterts, and the Achanes maybe work on the outside and work in the receiving game. So pretty tremendous to see him producing in that way. One that was the most disappointing thus far, although I do think his role will kind of grow throughout the season, is Charbonnet, him going at the 203 in our draft, and he's a paltry 3.9 fantasy points per game. Not a tremendous amount of opportunity. I do think that will grow, but it does seem to be Kenneth Walker's backfield, and Pete Carroll I think can be a bit fickle at times, and if he just decides something, it almost doesn't matter about production. It's just going to be the way he wants it. So let's see. Yeah, if we jump over to so wide receivers. Now this is the one that will be either the heartbreaker or you planted your flag and you're very excited at how it turned out. So what's a name or two that you were looking at here at the wide receiver?
I mean, so far it's been, Puka and Tank in round 4. Those, anything I always say, to anybody who even cares to listen, anything round 3 or later to me in Dynasty is just a total dart throw. Those round 2 guys, typically even late into round 2, a lot of times you're picking guys that maybe you're not sold on their talent, but they got really into a good situation, or vice versa, so once you start to get into like that round 3, round 4 and beyond territory, it's like everybody really kind of has the quote their guys or whatever that they like, and then you're just taking shots on them. And I love when one of those hits, even if it's not for me, it's just cool. And then I think you picked Jayden Reed in round 3, which is looking really strong as well. So those were the few that stood out to me. I mean, surprisingly, the guys that went at the top of the draft, we really haven't seen them get much of an opportunity. I mean, Jaxon, smith-njigba has like one of the lowest ADOTs in the league for receivers that have a certain volume of targets. Jordan Addison has looked really good, but somewhat inconsistent. But the opportunities there, he's getting a ton of snaps in Minnesota. So you got to feel pretty good about that one still, I think. And then Quentin Johnston, we'll see what happens with, with the unfortunate news that Mike Williams is out for the season now. But even to this point, Josh Palmer has been running clearly ahead of Johnston. So some of those higher top end guys were still, we're very obviously early in their rookie season. So but I think we've somewhat become accustomed to some of these top guys. We've been spoiled by some of these top guys, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson, these guys that just come into the league as rookies and just rock it right away. And So we try to plug all the studs into that, and it doesn't look like that's panning out with this draft class, but some of these late hits are pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like at a certain point, like you're saying, we've been used to a couple of these guys. If they're not getting 1,000-yard season in the rookie season, then they're trash. Understanding that they need to kind of get ramped up, and also even if you're a first round guy and you go in to be a starting receiver, it doesn't mean that you can supersede the comfort that the quarterback already has with that star wide receiver that he's likely been playing with for years on end at this point. And yeah, we'll see with Quentin Johnston. If anything, this Mike Williams injury and the result from it, the fallout, if you will, tells us everything, because definitely the Josh Palmer issue, at least for Quentin Johnston, as Josh Palmer was the guy that stepped in last season between filling in for Keenan Allen and Mike Williams at various points, and did so admirably. It kind of made a lot of people nervous, I think, getting Quentin Johnston, and then they think that's basically the Mike Williams insurance policy. We're about to find out if that's the case. And kind of like you're saying, I don't know. I mean, I do think there's certainly more of a comfort with Josh Palmer. And I know it's not like the Chargers started undefeated to start the season here. I think they're 1-2, I want to say, just getting their first win this week here. So I don't think they can leave too much up to chance. And I don't think that they're necessarily going to put it in Quentin Johnston's hands for him to get a tremendous target share and see how he's going to help change the rest of the season for the Chargers. A couple of the later guys, like the third rounders, which I know, like you're saying, like once it's the third, the fourth, it's dart throws, and like you can feel like you are the smartest person in the room when it works out, and when it doesn't, you're like, well, I mean, it's the third or fourth pick. What did we think was going to happen? Yeah, Jayden Reed, the 303, Cedric Tillman, 305, Rashee Rice, 306, then Marvin Mims, 309. Again, all guys, I think, at various points, whether it be in the offseason or even going into the season. Jayden Reed doing well. Cedric Tillman, I think, was expected to step up, and in the preseason he did pretty well. We'll see. Rashee Rice, week one, looked like he might be the guy, actually, and then not sure at this point. Marvin Mims started off terribly rough with everyone else being hurt, and then the first game back that Jerry Jeudy is there, he steps up. I mean, at this point, yeah, it looks like these guys that are taking the later couple rounds of rookie drafts are the ones that are stepping up sooner. Which interestingly enough might skew and confuse some of those dynasty managers to maybe trade away some of the first and second round wide receivers for not pennies or peanuts, but possibly think they need to just take a nice little haircut real quick just to get out from under it. And I'm here.
I know you're checking in on the other end of the line, ready for any perceived drop in value.
Oh, absolutely. With in our league with
streets, yeah.
Oh, yeah. With my first two picks being, which I'm glad they've worked out pretty well so far, Jayden Reed and Tyjae Spears, both in the third. I was like, I feel good about how it's gone so far. But
yeah,
if anyone's disappointed with the Zay Flowers or with whatever else, then send them my way. Well, I would say in most seasons, probably the least exciting position when it comes to needing to wait to see production. Apparently it's not the case with at least one of these guys. What's your thoughts on the tight ends?
Yeah, well, obviously you're referencing Sam LaPorta there, and I wanted to write down, like there's been a lot of conversation in the message boards and on Twitter and stuff. It's like, where do you think, how crazy do you think like somebody would be willing to go for Sam LaPorta right now in like a startup draft? Like what tight end do you think he gets drafted as? Because I'm seeing people say they would take him like top 5, and is that crazy? I don't know. I mean, I think at this point, wouldn't you rather have Sam LaPorta than Kyle Pitts? I mean, you've seen more out of Sam LaPorta in such a short NFL time. Kyle Pitts has been sold as, it's all hype, all traits, and we just have never seen it pan out. So it's pretty crazy to see. Like you said, we're used to this position taking forever to kind of preheat a little bit. And even a guy like Dalton Kincaid, who was the first tight end off the board, I mean, he's seeing some promising usage, but just nowhere near the production. So I know you can't always just compare, every situation's a little bit different, but it's been pretty cool to see, again, a guy like Sam LaPorta just jump in and have a tight end, at least a tight end start. I won't call it a tight end season, only being 3 weeks in, but somebody that I think you were pretty high on pre-draft as at the tight end position, and just completely popping off this week in particular, but playing really well so far.
It is unbelievable and kind of ironic with, it was the Lions who were trading away T.J. Hawkinson last season and replacing him with another of the same alumni status. And it was pretty funny just to see that happen. People get hyped through the offseason. And, Kincaid, I think if LaPorta wasn't doing what he's doing right now and was doing, modest production, maybe more in line with Kincaid, I think you'd kind of look at it and be like, all right, well, the usage of Kincaid, it's interesting usage and how they're playing him, that Knox is still involved, especially in the red zone, that sort of thing. So I think a lot of people already thought that was going to be the case. And the Bills are playing well, so I don't think that you're expecting a tremendous change over the season in terms of maybe his usage, maybe his production, in terms of the yardage he's getting and that sort of thing. But maybe don't change. But I don't see Knox losing his prominent position as a red zone target for the Bills, so that's going to zap a bit of Kincaid's touchdown upside. And with LaPorta, I mean, he's a feature in the offense, which is incredible. Goff, a tremendously, I think, consistent, level-headed quarterback who is thriving in this system now in Detroit, where Jameson Williams still isn't even back yet. You got, Josh Reynolds is playing out of his mind. Amon-Ra St. Brown is doing Amon-Ra St. Brown things. You've still got a pretty steady backfield there, of course, with them spending the draft pick on Jahmyr Gibbs. You've still got David Montgomery getting his money, who actually he's injured for this week and possibly more. But they're doing well. Another name that I was excited to see a guy like Schoonmaker step in based on the draft capital they used, but haven't seen much of him yet. But Luke Musgrave, I mean, he was the 403 in our rookie draft, and he's already, he essentially became the de facto starting tight end just because there was no one else there. No offense to, Josiah DeGuara, but Musgrave, the tight end 9 as of right now, which I know once you get outside the tight end, 3 or 4, it's a pretty steep drop off in production comparatively. But I mean, he's the guy there. I know they've still been without Christian Watson to spread the field, but of what I've seen from Musgrave, I mean, he seems like he could have a pretty decent floor of targets going forward. And I'm still not a tremendous believer in Love for the long term, but what he's done thus far is produce, and call it what you will, it's done pretty well for fantasy. So who am I to say? And I will say I'm not a fan of him until I'm a full season wrong, and then I'll just eat crow. But until then. But yeah, it's been an interesting, I mean, only 3 weeks in, but I think we've at least have enough that we've looked at where, some of these guys started the season hurt. Some have, been dealing with offenses getting ramped up, as we talked about last episode, talking about, you now have only 3 preseason games, and I feel like a lot of these offenses were maybe at somewhat of a disadvantage in terms of, that first week for fantasy production was abysmal just for the league all the way around. So it looks like everybody's kind of getting more ramped up now. Final question here, just kind of a general thought. What is your expectation of these games tonight? Is there something, I know you said you were looking for with Puka and a couple other guys there, but is there any just expectation of who you think's going to win these? Anyone you want to see show out, even outside of those guys that you're specifically looking for?
I would I think as all of us as football fans and fans of the league, I would really like to see Joe Burrow play a little bit better and also come out of this game clean. It's just concerning when you see one of the top quarterbacks in the league who injured himself in the way that he did in the offseason. And just to see that kind of flare up already, the offense hasn't looked good. This is a team that I think most people, maybe not most, but many people, myself included, agree that like this is their year. It's before they got to pay T. Higgins, before they got to truly, pay up for Jamar Chase. Joe Mixon took a pay cut. So this is a team that's been on the cusp. And I would just really like to see them get into some semblance of a rhythm and start trending back in the right direction. I think I saw that, I'm going to forget the stat, but it was something regarding how difficult it is for for teams to make the playoffs after starting 0-3. So, excuse me, that's what the Bengals are potentially staring down the barrel of. They've got this one at home tonight. They're down 3-0 at this time of recording in the first quarter. So hopefully Joe Burrow can get back on track. Is there anything you're looking out for?
Yeah, definitely curious to see how that goes because I know it was a mere couple days ago that we were seeing or hearing Ja'Marr Chase saying it didn't sound like it was likely that Burrow was even going to play, and I don't. It didn't sound like anything other than he sincerely did not think that Burrow was going to play. So, the fact that that was his indication, whether it was just seeing how Burrow was either practicing or not practicing, or whether it was Burrow actually telling him, "I don't think I'm going to." I mean, it seemed like leading up to any of the interview and stuff, media coming out about that was saying Burrow was doing anything and everything he could to play, and it obviously, even if that means playing through tremendous discomfort with his calf, and I'm sure restricted mobility. But yeah, I feel like before he got hurt, we saw T. Higgins kind of catch on a bit, and seeing that passing game really pick up. That was what we were excited to see. That's what we feel like is, before the season, I assumed it was going to be the Bengals and the Niners in the Super Bowl with the Niners taking it all. That's the passing game that we wanted to see that's going to get them to that point. And I think Joe Mixon has done pretty well considering, like you said, taking a pay cut. I think last season he had plenty of inefficient games that people were concerned about his fantasy viability going forward. But he's looked okay. And, of course, it's Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins, tremendous talents. Hopefully they can keep Higgins after this season or once his contract is up. I don't know if they can. But, yeah, otherwise, see if that DeAndre Swift trade that I made in Dynasty was a huge mistake or if he's going to have a second career game at this point. So, I think I made the wise choice on that one. But, well, Tyler, I sincerely appreciate it. I know we'll be watching the rest of these games, and I'm sure we'll be texting our group chat about how terrible the decisions are. Like, I believe Devin White just intercepted Jalen Hurts. Yep, might happen. Anyway.
All right.
Final thoughts, shout out, quote, cheers. What do you got?
Oh man, I just I don't have a lot for you other than I just hope that that next weekend is a lot better to our Hokies, a lot better to my wife's Bulldogs. Been a rough start for college football in our household and actually professional football too. The Panthers are winless. The Titans don't look very good. So my wife is a self-proclaimed Cowboys fan, even though it's really just a fan of Dak Prescott. So they took the L on the chin yesterday. So not a great football weekend for us. So just hoping for better times next weekend. But either way, we'll be back here talking about it and breaking it down.
No question. Yeah, of course, I'm a Panthers fan and Marley is a Vikings fan. So we're feeling sincerely defeated, as the records would indicate, even combined. But yeah, looking forward to all of our collective teams turning it around and at least getting a couple of wins in there across all those different rosters. But yeah, appreciate it. Enjoy the last tail end of week 3, and we'll catch up, brother.
Yes, sir.